It's time to get your news on. We are VK1 WIA.
And getting it on in the newsroom this week, I'm Graham, VK4BB, editor for the WIA National News. We'll hear from WIA Vice President and Director Lee Moyle, VK3GK, and ACMA's latest news. Also from Clive, VK6CSW, with RAOTC News. And when Clive dropped us the note this week, he also pointed out that Sunday today is the 84th anniversary of the declaration of World War II, a time he says he remembers all too well. In fact, London got a little bit noisy in the 40s.
This is VK1 WIA. All points of contacts from today's news stories are to be found in print when you read the web editions, www.wia.org.au.
This is WIA Vice President Lee Moyle, VK3GK. Firstly, wishing all the DX dads a happy Father's Day and hoping that all-time new one does LOTW. Earlier this week, our friends at ACMA released their latest update on the proposed amateur radio qualification and assessor accreditation arrangements. In May 2023, ACMA advised that the Australian Maritime College, AMC, had decided not to extend its deed for services related to amateur qualifications and call sign recommendations. The ACMA plans to deliver these services from February 2024. ACMA would consult on the proposed new arrangements for an ACMA-managed scheme in August 2023. ACMA are now consulting on proposed arrangements for a new amateur radio qualification framework and assessor accreditation scheme to be managed by the ACMA, and they propose to start implementing these arrangements in December 2023, so they are in place when the amateur class licence begins in February 2024. To support the ACMA's new functions, ACMA proposed to introduce new fees for issuing ACMA recognition certificates, assessing applications for recognition of prior learning, and issuing call signs. The fees proposed are similar to the current AMC fees for these services. A full outline of these fees and how they have been calculated is contained in their draft 2023-24 fees for service cost recovery implementation statement, which is also open for consultation. ACMA invite comments from stakeholders on both consultations by 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday the 26th of September 2023. Update: Scientific Licensing Guidelines. ACMA are also publishing information to support the consideration of applications for assigned scientific licenses to authorise certain higher power experimentation used by amateurs. The updated scientific apparatus licenses guidelines will provide further information about using and applying for scientific apparatus licenses, including for the use of high-power amateur stations. ACMA will let us know when these guidelines are published on the ACMA's website. Response to submissions, September 2022 consultation. ACMA have considered the submissions made during the September 2022 consultation on proposed class licensing arrangements and the proposal for staged implementation of high-power authorisation for amateur operators. ACMA's response to submissions outlines what they heard from stakeholders in the consultation and ACMA's answers, outcomes and next steps. An important clarification is in the previous ACMA update on the 19th of July 2023, ACMA advised of proposed changes to amateur access in the 50 to 52 MHz and 3.4 to 3.6 GHz frequency bands. This was incorrect, as the changes were implemented in accordance with the Radio Communications Licence Conditions, Amateur Licence, Omnibus, Amendment Instrument 2023 No. 1. These amendments commenced on the 14th of July 2023 and changed amateur operators' access in the 50 to 52 MHz and 3.4 3.6 gig bands. This means that standard class operators have had full access to the full 6 metre band from July the 14th. More information on the overseas class licence and associated operating permits for amateurs visiting Australia can be found on the WIA website news section and the ACMA website. Last week, WIA Secretary and Director Peter Klee, VK8ZZ, announced the appointments to several volunteer positions, including the Technical Advisory Committee, Ross Hull Contest Manager, Spectrum Strategy Committee and the QSL Bureau. This week, the board are pleased to confirm the following appointments to the Youth of the Air team, or YOTA. YOTA Coordinator Steve Kennedy, VK6SJ. YOTA Deputy Coordinator Alec Cherry, VK2APC. The board of the WA congratulates Steve and Alec and looks forward to them promoting YOTA activities to both existing and aspiring amateurs alike. The Wireless Institute was well represented at the Tokyo Ham Fair on the weekend of the 19th and 20th of August. Ham Fair attendees usually number around 30,000 for the weekend function. This year the DX Seminar and DX Dinner were held on the Saturday night with many JA and international hams attending. WIA past and present directors attending Ham Fair included Peter Young, VK3MV, WA Life member and past WA Director and past IARU Region 3 Director, Chris Platt, VK5CP, past WA Director, Oscar Hayes, VK3TX, JK1TYB, who is the current IARU Region 3 Director and past WA Director, and myself, Lee Moyle, VK3GK, JK1UIR, current WA Vice President. Discussions on numerous topics were had with IARU President Tim Allen, VE6SH, March President, Mode, 9 Mike 2 India Radio, and several other International Society members. IARU had their annual meeting in Tokyo on the same weekend, where the JA winner of the IARU contest is given the plaque sponsored by the WIA. That's it for now. 7-3 from Lee, VK3GK.
We are VK1WIA. Now, operational news with Felix, VK4FUQ.
Hello there. Now contest-wise, the luck of the Irish. IRTS SSB Field Day this weekend. Activity will focus on SSB phone contacts in the 3.5, 7, 14, 21 and 28 MHz bands. October, Oceania DX contest. Phone the first full weekend in October, 0600 hours UTC Saturday to 0600 hours UTC Sunday. CW, second full weekend in October from 0600 hours UTC Saturday to 0600 hours UTC Sunday. November, VHF UHF Spring Field Day, 25-26 November. 0100 hours UTC Saturday to 0059 hours UTC Sunday. But to make it a little fairer in VK6, they add 3 hours on the start and end times. DX window, September. VI10 VKFF running all year celebrates the 10-year anniversary of the VKFF group. VK90AR for Amateur Radio Magazine. October 2023, next month, sees your WIA celebrating 90 years of continuous publishing of Amateur Radio Magazine. The WIA will be running the VK90AR activity until December 31. Special event station VI100MB all year celebrates the centenary of the Manly Warringah Radio Society. New Year, E6am from October 10 to 23. CW, SSB, FT8 and maybe some radio on 160-6 metres. QSL via Club Loxo QRS, preferred, LOTW or via LZ1GC, direct or bureau. Kazoo, M0CFW, JK3GAD will again be active from Rodriguez Island as 3B9KW during the CQWWCW contest, November 25-26. Activity before, after contest, November 19 to December 1, as 3B9/M0CFW. QSL via LOTW. Taiwan, BM0 QSO until December 31, mostly using digital modes. QSL via BM2 JCC. Norway, LA100K is the special call sign in use by the Akademisk Radio Club LA1K to celebrate the 100th anniversary of its foundation. It is the oldest amateur radio club in Norway. The special call sign will be in use until the 31st of December. Luxembourg, LX90 RTL is in use to celebrate the 90th anniversary of Radio Luxembourg's first long-wave broadcast. Listen for the call sign on the HF bands on SSB, CW, digital modes, and via satellite. All QSOs will be confirmed automatically via the DARC Bureau. For VK1WIA National News, I'm Felix, VK4FUQ Enningham.
From here, there and everywhere, you've tuned to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now with international news, Jason, VK2LAW.
Hello, and international news is with thanks to IARU, RSGB, RAC, ARRL, NZART, EHAM, Amateur Radio Newsline, RadioWorld.com, and the worldwide sources of the WIA. In news from Region 1, IARU Region 1 will hold its next General Conference from the 1st to the 4th of November in Serbia. Topics include general reports, organisational and budget proposals, the new HF band plan, VHF, UHF and SHF changes, and consideration of the WRC 23, and the World Radio Communications Conference, which follows shortly afterwards. Other themes include strategic projects and progress, accommodating digital technologies, contests, EMC, and other spectrum matters. It's been announced that the UK will hold the world's first summit on artificial intelligence safety in November. The AI Summit will be held at the iconic Bletchley Park, which is one of the birthplaces of computer science. To news from Region 2, the meeting of the International Amateur Radio Union Region 2 Executive Committee met virtually on August 2nd, with Region 2 President and Area A Director George Gorsline, Victor Echo 3 Yankee Victor presiding over the meeting. A major topic of discussion was the status of the Region 2 preparations for the upcoming WRC 23, which will be held in Dubai in November. Region 2 representation at CITEL and CTU meetings were reviewed and plans were confirmed for representation at the WRC. Members of the Champlain Valley Amateur Radio Club gathered last weekend at the Atlas F missile silo in Champlain to make the first silo-to-silo radio contact there since the 1960s. The original goal was to just set up and test our equipment, Matt Prey, CVARC Second Vice President, said. But, as it turns out, I found out about a group through my friend out in Texas who was doing a similar event at an Atlas F missile site there, so we decided we were going to try to make contact. Silo-to-silo contact. The group set up a 15-metre antenna suspended between two poles and utilised two custom-built radios operated by Prey and Mark Varon, president of the club, in effort to make contact with an operator at an Atlas site in Texas. We thought it would be a unique thing not only to set up and test here, but this might be the first time there's been any silo-to-silo contact since the Cold War of the 60s, Prey said. Diane Sutter is set to receive the 2023 National Radio Award from the National Association of Broadcasters this USA fall. Diane is the founder and dean of the NAB Leadership Foundation's Broadcast Leadership Training Program, a 10-month MBA-style course designed to teach aspiring broadcast owners and senior-level executives, particularly women and people of colour, the fundamentals of purchasing, owning and running successful radio and television stations. Nearly 400 broadcasters have graduated from BLT since its inception 24 years ago. In an inspiring show of camaraderie, a tight-knit ham radio community of YouTubers rallied around Renee 6, Kilo Romeo 5 Sierra India X-Ray, August 18, as she undertook a heart-stopping parachute jump on behalf of her husband Vern 6, Kilo Victor 5 Sierra India X-Ray, Vern, who has already completed 14 jumps. Renee was able to jump in tandem with the well-known parachute mobile ham operator Kilo Delta 9 Oscar Lima November Carlos. KD9 OLN agreed to the jump and assisted Renee in completing this daring achievement from 12,800 feet. This achievement has been recognised globally and showcases the power of unity and determination within the adventurous amateur radio community. What makes this achievement even more astonishing is that Renee's successful jump led her to become one of only 5 people worldwide to establish a QSO under such extreme circumstances. Her first of 3 contacts during the Canopy 246-second descent was to her husband Vern, KV5SIX. You can find out more about KD9OLN on his YouTube channel. For VK1 WIA National News in Sydney, I'm Jason, VK2LAW.
Rewind. I'm Linda, VK7QP. Howden Crystals. Barry McCann from Tas Maritime Radio dropped a box of crystals off at the Reist Clubrooms in Hobart the other day, and Justin VK7TW went through them and found a couple of FT243 holder Max Howden branded crystals. This sparked his interest to find out more, as this name is well known to many VK amateurs. The following is sourced from the Radio Museum website. Walter Francis Maxwell Howden, 1899 to 1980, made the first successful two-way amateur telegraphic shortwave radio contact between Australia and the US on November 4th, 1924, followed by England 9 days later. This was from the experimental station VK3BQ he operated at his residence in Box Hill, Melbourne. In 1924, he worked as a consulting engineer for Corbett, Durham & Co., designing tunaphone radios. After a visit by Alf Traeger and Dr. John Flynn of the Royal Flying Doctor Service in 1930, he agreed to manufacture and supply crystals for Traeger Flying Doctor radios. This was the start of his business, which he operated from his home. As business increased, he built a workshop factory in his backyard. Initially, the crystals were hand ground, and he later invested in a lapping machine. His staff were mainly family, and he supplied the military with crystals during World War II. He supplied crystals to industry and radio amateurs until he retired in the 1970s, with his son taking over the business, which he ran until the 1980s. Rewinding here on the WIA National News, this has been Linda, VK7QP.
From here, there and everywhere, you've tuned to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now, special interest group news with Cole, VK3GTV.
Hello, first up it's Worldwide Special Interest Group News, Summits on the Air, Worldwide Flora and Fauna Program, Parks on the Air, and other adventure groups. POTA in the 1940s. Not only did these park activators need steer clear of foxes and drop bears, but a heavily armed group intent on tracking these ops down. Half reenactment and half actual footage, Churchill's Secret Agents is a 5-part documentary available on Netflix, and Episode 4 details the Morse training received by SOE agents and discusses the advantages of CW over voice comms for field operation. What makes it pertinent to POTA is the role of these SOE radio operators, their value, and typical short longevity when deployed, the suitcase, portable rigs they used, accurate discussion of the value of Morse code, the German triangulation/hunting of the transmitters, etc., including working their radios out in the woods, including wire antennas tossed into the trees. Sound familiar? Worldwide Special Interest Group's Final Frontier. Teams hack U.S. Air Force satellite in space cybersecurity contest. The United States Air Force has successfully concluded its pioneering HackerSat competition. Emerging triumphant was the Italian consortium, a fusion of 5 Italian cyber research teams whose accomplishment netted them the coveted first-place position and a princely sum of $50,000. The essence of the competition was the penetration of Moonlighter's protective layers, enabling participants to override the satellite's predetermined scope of observation targets. Successful teams then wielded the power to direct the satellite's lens towards desired focal points on the Earth's surface, capturing images that were subsequently relayed back to ground stations as proof. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, IOTA. Galway Radio Experimenters Club annual de-expedition to Inishbofin Island has been heard on air, and they pack up today, the 3rd of September. Inishbofin Island has an area of approximately only 12 square kilometres and is situated offshore some 7 kilometres northwest of Clifton, County Galway. EJ4GRC is their station, and IOTA number is EU121. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Maritime, including ILLW News. Recently, we saw the 26th Annual International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend event take place with 409 stations listed in 42 countries. The USA was just ahead of Germany with 65 entries to 62, closely followed by Australia with a respectable 40. There were some good DX contacts to be made with Gibraltar, Trinidad, Iceland and Guernsey, to name a few. The relaxed nature of this two-day event seems to appeal to Oz amateurs, as we only have 400 lighthouses, most of which are inaccessible, yet 10% of them were activated over the weekend. The ILLW is unique in that it's not a contest or an award, it's free and logs are not required. It's an opportunity to go portable and show the public what amateur radio and lighthouses are all about. Give it a try next year, and let us here at WIA National News also know of your activation plans so we can give you a free plug. Those listening in VK4 or via Tony VK7AX's site will have a full report on an activation of Grassy Hill Light, also known as Cooktown Light, an active lighthouse located on Grassy Hill above Cooktown, Queensland, on the south side of the entrance to Endeavour River. And while still in maritime, from that only VK club that told us beforehand they were going to activate a light.
Hi all, this is Nathan, VK5 DAD from the South Coast Amateur Radio Club. On the weekend of the 19th and 20th of August, we participated in the Lighthouse Lightship Weekend from Point Malcolm. We made 195 contacts on HF and worked 22 countries. The highlight of my weekend was a contact made with Brian, VK5BK, at 103 years young. On Thursday, the 7th of September, at 7:30 p.m. at our club rooms, Seaford Meadows Scout Hall, Railway Parade, we have a tech talk by Paul, VK5 PAS, on the recent trip to Trowbridge Island. We'd love to see you there. On the 23rd and 24th of September, the South Coast Amateur Radio Club are looking to hold a foundation course with exam. Please contact Mike, VK5ZC, at scark.org.au. 73s, and hope to catch you on the air soon. This has been Nathan, VK5 DAD, from the South Coast Amateur Radio Club.
Thanks, Nathan. VK5 DAD, a great call sign for today being Father's Day here in VK. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Radio Amateur Oldtimers. With the latest RAOTC news, it's over to Clive, VK6CSW.
Reminding you that the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia's September Bulletin goes to air tomorrow. Frequency change. Eastern States listeners are reminded that the 00 hours UTC transmission is now on 28.450 MHz. Full details of this change, plus all other broadcast times, can be found on the club website, or just Google RAOTC broadcasts. WA listeners are reminded of the experimental transmission on 28.450 MHz scheduled for 2 p.m. Perth time tomorrow afternoon. This month, instead of the usual broadcast, we're offering an interesting historical broadcast from 2001 by Alan Doble, VK3AMD. The latest news and information will be broadcast next month. Everyone, RAOTC members and non-members alike, is most welcome to listen to the program and join in the callbacks afterwards. If none of the transmission times suit you, you can download the audio file at any time from today from the club website. The next lunchtime meeting for members and friends of the RAOTC in Perth is on Tuesday, September the 12th at the Woodbridge Hotel, East Guildford, starting at 11:30. 7-3 from Clive, VK6CSW.
Thanks, Clive. So, once again, tune in tomorrow for the September RAOTC Bulletin. Enjoy the program and please join in the callbacks afterwards. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Radio Scouting. JOTA, Jamboree on the Air, is always held on the third weekend in October, so for 2023, that's October 20 to 22. Alec, VK2APC, has the details.
Thank you, Cole. First, the Ask Cub Scouts had a communications activity on Wednesday night, 23rd of August. There was a lot of pre-planning and coordination that went into getting amateurs lined up to answer the Cubs HF calls on the chosen frequency. The call went out to the Wagga Amateur Radio Club and the Canberra Region Amateur Radio Club for volunteers to assist. Pete, VK2 PET, gave a briefing to the Cubs before the activities on the radio started. This brief included behavior expected around in the radio room, who they will be in contact with, radio operating protocol, and a tour of VK2 PET's car that is full of radios. Cubs came in groups of 2 or 3 to have a quick chat with either Phil, VK2NE, or Michael, VK2AMF. In the radio room, Don, VK2XDT, was at the microphone with VK2PET, Stacy, VK2SJC, and Jenny, VK2TOT, helping out in the background. The Cubs used the call sign VI100YSG to celebrate the 100 years of YAS Scouting. The Cubs asked quite a few good questions of VK2NE and VK2AMF. Both of these gentlemen were very patient with the Cubs, which helped greatly to make this a fun event for the Cubs to get their communications badge and a lead to Joda/Jody in October. YAS Scout Group sends a big thanks to everyone who helped out at the event with making this event a success, including a special thanks to VK2NE and VK2AMF, and to the other operators on backup on the local 2-meter repeaters. For VK1 WIA National News, I'm Alec, VK2 APC in Sydney.
Thanks, Alec. And by the way, congratulations on joining VK's YOTA coordinator, Steve Kennedy, VK6SJ, as the YOTA Deputy Coordinator. Worldwide Special Interest Group's Rescue Radio, when all else fails. After 18 months of preparation, the Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Club, BARIC, is currently partway through the community-focused emergency communications exercise, Operation Radar, the rapid deployment of amateur radio created to fill a critical gap in emergency planning by providing communications resources to bushfire evacuees and regional administrators when electricity, mobile phone networks and internet have failed. Commencing at 7 a.m. today, Sunday the 3rd of September, 8 bushfire places of last resort around the city of Bendigo are currently being activated with standalone field radio stations linked to the BARIC headquarters at Bendigo East Hall and to outlying stations up to 300 kilometres away. An important correction about our story last week when we reported the BARIC exercise was thought to be the first of its kind in Australia, and have since learned that there have been in fact some similar amateur radio exercises conducted in Australia, some during actual emergencies. BARIC thanks those for setting the record straight and congratulates all amateur radio clubs and individual operators for their contributions assisting communities in need. Operation Radar is being conducted via the VK3 RCV repeater in central Victoria and on 40 metres, 7.115 MHz, and will conclude shortly before 1300 hours today. A video of the exercise will be made available on the BARIC YouTube channel at a later date. And that's it from me for this week. I'm Cole, VK3GTV, wishing all the dads a happy Father's Day.
On the social scene, September 9, VK4, it's Sunfest. It's put on by the Sunshine Coast Amateur Radio Club and is held at Mountain Creek State School. And the 14th of September is the next Hunter Radio Group meeting. It'll be held at the electronics section at Newcastle TAFE. With more again this week, something special, and here's Graham, VK2FA.
If you've ever used Echolink, and no matter where you live anywhere in the world, you're invited to a special talk here in Australia by the ham who created it. Jonathan Taylor, K1RFD, who developed Echolink, the voice-over internet protocol network for linking repeaters and amateurs, will be guest of the Hunter Radio Group, VK2AWX, in Newcastle on the 14th of September. Echolink has global reach of nearly 500,000 radio amateurs. For those who cannot attend the talk in person, Amateur Radio New South Wales will provide a link via Zoom, where Jonathan will deliver his talk remotely. Jonathan, a resident of Connecticut, USA, was inducted into the CQ Magazine Amateur Radio Hall of Fame in 2005. The program will take place between 1800 and 2200 Australian Eastern Standard Time. The Zoom link can be found in the text version of this newscast. For the Hunter Radio Group and WIA National News, I'm Graham, VK2FA.
And finally, in VK2 again, it's Sarkfest, September 23 at 8 a.m. Now till next we meet, I'm Graham, VK4BB. walk softly.
From Australia, this has been the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
Courtesy of Bevan, VK5 BD's ATV and YouTube channel, this has been WIA National News. We're back now, live and local, and your voice, your callbacks. And don't forget, tick like.
Hello there, this is VK3OTN, the official station of the Radio Amateur Oldtimers Club of Australia, with a monthly news broadcast for members and friends of the club for September 2023. This month, instead of the usual broadcast, we will offer an historical broadcast from years past. The usual news and information will be broadcast next month. I'm Andrew, the VK3 Charlie Alpha Hotel. I have broadcast files going back as far as 2001. Many of the older files aren't the greatest as far as technical quality goes, archived in either real audio or Windows Media audio format. These produced a smaller file size back in the days when the leading edge technology was dial-up internet. Remember that? This month we have an original broadcast from December 2001. Details on when to hear these news and information broadcasts are available at the club website www.raotc.org.au. The VK3OTN is available on a wide range of radio platforms, HF, VHF and UHF, 2-metre repeaters, amateur television, DMR, that is digital mobile radio, and D-Star. These news broadcasts are available for download for up to 6 months, just in case you miss the original news broadcast from the RAOTC website. If you'd like to contact the club, then why not send us an email, raotc@raotc.org.au. I hope you enjoy this month's broadcast.
Hello there, this is Alan Doble, VK3AMD and associated relay stations is VK3OTN, the official call sign of the Radio Amateur Oldtimers Club. And now some news about the club and about this transmission. As regular listeners will know, the monthly RAOTC news and information transmission originates from VK3AMD on 145.7 MHz FM and is relayed on other frequencies by volunteer stations. In order to provide the news and information service to members in VK6, the original broadcast is recorded and then transmitted on 14.150 MHz upper sideband, beamed towards Perth, usually by Ron Fisher, VK3OM, at 10 a.m. local Western Australian time. This 20-metre rebroadcast is then relayed into the West Australian repeater groups WIA Newslink repeaters, both VHF and UHF, by Clive, VK6 CSW. However, over the past couple of months, poor conditions on 20 metres at that time of day between Melbourne and Perth have been rather poor. Therefore, in order to improve the rebroadcast into VK6, arrangements have been made to record the original broadcast from VK3AMD on 2 metres FM into a compressed digital audio format and to send that file via the internet to Tony Savoury, VK6 Tango Sugar. Then, when Ron VK3OM begins his 20-metre rebroadcast at 10 a.m. local West Australian time, Tony will simultaneously play the compressed digital file via the VK6 repeater group's WIA News-linked repeaters. Therefore, if any WIA listeners to RAOTC news and information sessions retransmission on 14150 MHz are having trouble in copying the signal because of poor band conditions, they will be able to listen to a static and fading-free signal on their local repeater. The first trial of this system is in operation today, and all amateurs involved in providing this facility would appreciate feedback on its success or otherwise in the callbacks. Clive, VK6CSW, the VK6 Repeater Group President, who has so generously helped the RAOTC out in the past by providing the repeater network relay from 20 metres, will be standing by to back up to help if required. There is a suggestion that in the future there could possibly be a retransmission in West Australia on 40 metres from Perth, which will just about cover all areas of VK6, and Albany on the southern coast, to Kalgoorlie in the east, and Geraldton in the north. Plus, a copy of this digital file in read audio format can be sent to all who may request it in VK6. The RAOTC committee would like to thank Clem Patchett, VK6CW, Clive Wallace, VK6CSW, Tony Savoury, VK6TS, and Bill Roper, VK3BR, for all the work they have put and are putting into getting this system up and running. Unfortunately, Clem Patchett will not be able to take part in today's broadcast due to another commitment. This is VK3OTN. With great pleasure, we report that the following 3 associate members have now reached the point in time when they have automatically been upgraded from associate live members to full live membership. They are Brendan Connolly, VK2BJC, member number 1213, Ian McLean, VK3JQ, member number 1215, and Ian Godsall, VK3 Victor Papa, member number 1220. And now it's good to welcome to membership John P. Overson, VK3GU, as an associate and becomes member number 1235, and Ray Price, full member, whose number is 1236. And we regret the passing promise of George Schultz, VK2GS, who was member number 1164, and Fred Stark, VK2ABC, who was member number 287. And we'll pause just for a few moments in memory of those friends, and then I must add that another departed friend is Alex Stewart, VK3BMS, Bright Mile Steel, as he was known, passed away in Canberra a couple of months ago. We don't have the actual date. He was member number 116. Alec was a long-time member of the club and the OTC group as well. He served a short term as our president before medical complications caused him to resign from that position. He moved to a nursing home in Canberra earlier this year to be near his married daughter, Val, VK3BMS. This is VK3OTN. The August 1929 issue of CQ came into my hands recently, and I was very interested to find that on page 133 there was a description and 2 photographs of station VK3DC. Interestingly, the operator of the station is not named in the article, although it names his location in his parents' home at 296 Williams Road, Toorak, which is nearly opposite the historically interesting Como homestead, if you know the geography of Melbourne. As it happens, I got to know Stuart Emling very well at about the time that this article was published in 1929, because he was captain in charge of the Army's 3rd Divisional Signal Wireless Section, which I joined in what was then compulsory military training. I stayed on after the federal government abolished compulsory training and eventually left after a total of 6.5 years. My discharge papers were signed by the famous Colonel, later Brigadier Jack Stevens. Stuart Emling, VK3DC, was a civilian until the outbreak of World War II and rose to the rank of Colonel. He didn't receive amateur radio after the war and died about 4 years ago. Page 123 of the book, Signals, A History of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals, 1788 to 1947, records that Stuart Endling persuaded the Army authorities to have a shortwave transmitter and receiver in 1930, at a time when Army radios worked on the 200 to 400 metres or 1,000 to 1,200 metres wavelengths. The transmitter was built by Army Ordnance, and the receiver, a regenerative detector with 1 or 2 stages of audio, was designed by Stuart Endling and built in his shack on Sunday afternoons. The book names me as being part of the group that built it. We used it, but it was apparently destroyed as a one-off at the outbreak of World War II. This is VK3OTN. I've recently come across some documentation about an interesting family of VK3 amateurs located on a farm at Kallawadda in Western Victoria. Mrs. Hutchings, VK3AHL, was the mother of Marjorie Hutchings, VK3HQ, and Alan Hutchings, VK3HL. The family story, which was published in the Alara page of AR magazine in 1980, was written by Marjorie, who had become Mrs. Marjorie Williamson. The article contains 2 photographs of groups at the 1932 Hamfest, which is mentioned in the story. The call signs but not the names are listed under the photos which were taken at Kallawadda and Glenorchy. I appear in the Glenorchy photo with my then call sign of VK3ZM. And here is the family story written by then Marjorie Williamson, VK3HQ, and she says, "We lived on a property at Kallawadda, 18 miles north of Stawell in the Wimmera district, where farming and grazing produced wheat and wool from merino sheep. My brother Alan's interest in amateur radio went back to the early 1920s when he experimented with a spark coil transmitter, and his call sign was VK3HL, was 3HL, later to become VK3HL. Great was the excitement when music and speech were heard distinctly from station KGO in Oaklands, California, a distance of about 6,000 miles. In 1925, a musical and vocal program from Durban was heard and confirmed, and this made the daily papers. Alan obtained his WAC certificate in 1928. And Alan VK3AHL and Ivan VK3H, who lived a few miles away, were involved in the early application of radio to aircraft ground control in the East-West Air Race in 1929. And they also saw the possibilities of radio help for fire brigades about 1936 and used to experiment with portable radio transmitters and receivers in their cars. Always backed up by his wife Lilla, Alan continued his radio interests, including DX contacts, and in 1959 they went on a trip overseas, meeting many amateurs personally, and including W2 Charlie Charlie, Al Scarlett, and his wife Ethel, who kept in touch with our family members for many years. My mother became caught up in the interest of amateur radio through helping Alan and became the first licensed radio operator to transmit in Victoria. Her call sign was VK3HM. I can remember her with a soldering iron in her hand, building her own shortwave receiver and transmitter. These were shown at an amateur radio exhibition in Melbourne in 1930. Her shack was next to our lounge room, and she would take every opportunity between household duties and cooking meals to work DX as well as local amateurs. Relating how she obtained her WAC certificate, she said that on Christmas Eve 1929, she had worked at least one station in each continent. There still remained England, and sitting well into the night, she eventually established contact with an English amateur who congratulated her on her achievement. The really pleasing thing to her was that she was able to exchange the season's greeting with somebody in the homeland, as it was then called. That's quoted in the listener in September 1930. The electricity supply was a 32-volt DC house lighting outfit which supplied power for the households on the farm, and in our shacks we used a 32-volt to 500-volt dynamotor with suitable filters. The transmitter was a 3-stage crystal control coupled to a horizontal ZEP antenna about 50 feet high. VK3HM worked mainly on the 80, 40 and 20 metre bands. I thought 2 amateurs in one family were enough until one day Mother said, "Come and listen to this musical American station." I donned the earphones and afterwards twiddled the dials and felt quite irritated that I couldn't understand the CW signals. That decided me to learn the Morse code, followed later by the theory, with a lot of help and advice, and in 1932 I obtained my AOCP and the call sign VK3HQ. I shared the rig of VK3HM and used to chase DX at all hours and found it a fascinating hobby which led to many friendships and pen friends. QSL cards and photos were exchanged in various parts of the globe. And I eventually got my WAC working South America on 10 metres and a little Hartley rig. Some of the old-timers may remember a handfest at Bremerhaven, Colorado in 1933 when every bed, including makeshift ones, were crammed into every space available. And several of the amateurs stayed with Ivan VK3RH and his wife Iris, who lived a few miles away. Pardon me. In 1939, our radio equipment was sealed under government orders until the end of World War II in 1945. During this time, we were all shocked by Mother Southern's death in December 1943 at the age of 66. VK3HL continued his amateur radio activities and regular skids right up to the time of his death in 1973. During the war, I was in the RAAF nursing service in Japan and married Clive there in 1947, and we returned to Victoria, Australia in 1949. I've never set up another amateur radio station. The interest has always been there, and I think it's wonderful that we now have ALARA with so many members and such an enthusiastic committee, and I wish everyone good luck in 73 for the future. That was a story of a very interesting family in earlier days. And this particular article was first published on the Alara page of AO magazine in 1980. This is VK3AMD and associated relay stations as VK3OTN for the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club. And a bit more about Alan Hutchings, 3HL. He was deeply involved in 1929, was an early member of the RAAF Wireless Reserve in 1933, and later the Volunteer Defence Corps, in which he enlisted in July 42 and was discharged in September 1945. As manager of the family farm in Colorado, he was reserved from active service. Many of our members were in the Air Force Reserve, so those listening today, and I hope others will be interested, in a personal letter written to Alan Hutchins on April 1937 when he apparently expressed some criticism of the Reserve's operation. This letter was written by the late Vaughan Marshall, BK3 UK, under the heading of Royal Australian Air Force Reserve, 3rd District Headquarters, Argyle Raid Q. It discloses some of the thinking behind the creation and building of that wonderful body, the RAAF Reserve. Here she goes. This is from Vaughan Marshall. Dear Alan, that's addressed to Alan Hutchins. So it has come at last. For 3 weeks I've been dreading the thought of a letter to you because I know what the contents would be without opening it. I turned over in my mind 100 times what my best course of action would be, whether to take the bull by the horns and write to you before you did, or whether to wait the evil day and then see what could be done. There was the chance, 1 in a million, you'd change your determination of last November, so I didn't write. Well, Alan, old man, there are no recriminations on either side, so long as you don't feel that I've let you and the boys down. I've done everything a mortal man could do at headquarters, and I've been alternatively insulted, cursed, praised, and congratulated in such a bewildering manner that I don't just know how I do stand. I've pleaded, wheedled, begged, and threatened, and every other like word to get what we want to make the show what it is. All with the same result, that we will get those things eventually, but in the meantime, the ways of the official mind are tortuous. This I do know, that they think a lot of us down there know what we have been through during these years, but that does not hasten the red tape that pervades everything. As long as you country fellows know, I haven't been sitting down letting things take their course. It takes a lot of work to make our little show go even the way it does. How much work only the chaps who have stayed here for a spell know, and sometimes I wonder whether it's worth it all. Then 2 things come to my mind, and I hoe into the job with renewed vigour and enthusiasm again. Firstly, the ideal behind the whole thing. I believe the heart and soul in what we are striving to do. I believe it's an essential, and lastly, I believe that we are the people best fitted to do it. This country needs an emergency communication system. This country needs trained operators, and we can supply both. By supplying them, we therefore are doing our part toward the defence of the empire, and more especially our own part of it. That is something I've tried to do ever since I was old enough. It was because of the reserve that I resigned from the army. After that thought comes an understanding of what the old-timers have done for the reserve, how Murray, Allen, and Ivan, Neil, Gordon, and Austin have carried on month after month when there did not seem to be any possible form of return or even pleasure. You praise me for what I have done for the reserve, Allen. Those names are the ones really responsible for the position of the organisation today. Their patience, help and reliability, when that word sums up everything, places them above all others in my mind. For their sakes, I feel therefore the show must go on. They've given it their best too, that they must not be let down. Thinking along those lines, I come to your letter and its contents, Alan. It seems possible that one of that band is going out. To say it brings a feeling of sadness is not describing my feelings. It goes far deeper than that. This reserve is not skin deep. Do you know, old man, even as I type this, I feel a lump in my throat at the thought of it. Perhaps I'm a trifle crazy on this subject, but the old reserve is part of my life. It isn't as though I can't get someone to take your place. I can't put any one of 10 men in it in a minute. But not one of them will be 3HL. 3BC, 3C3, they're the reserve signals, whose signal I've copied every Sunday way back to 1930. Not one of these fellows can have that mystical something cloaking him that can only come after a long association of working together. Perhaps you may think I'm making a big story out of this, but I earnestly mean what I say. The 3HL is replaceable. I'm hoping that the results of the Air Board's deliberations will be available within the next week or so, and of course things will then be different footing entirely. This is Vaughan Marshall talking to Alan Hutchins. To put crudely, your outlook at the moment is that your Sunday mornings can be put to better use. My job is to alter the reserve in some way to make it felt that the reserve schedule is the best possible way of spending the same morning. I've always tried to do that, but the limited time I have available for thinking out new stunts, and also that no one else in the reserve seems to think it will help any by thinking out a stunt on his own, the demand far exceeds the supply. Now a word about the new scheme. You'll remember I explained in broad detail to you last year. Well, Wiggins, I think that was Will Commander Wiggins, has passed on with his blessing with only minor alterations which are really improvements as far as we're concerned. The main thing about the whole business is that the fact is we'll be directly under the OC of Squadron, who is all-powerful, and what is to be done within his little world. Therefore, if we want anything, I have only to go to him, and I will be the fountainhead straight away instead of our requests now going through anything up to a dozen pairs of hands and being lost en route more often than not. This is really the whole point on which the reserve of the future will be successful. We will be directly under the man who can get us the necessities required at any time and speedily too. Another point, I'll be the signals officer of the squadron, I suppose, within one or two places of it. Thus it will be my job to see we're getting our share of the normal squadron work. The old bogey of non-cooperation will then definitely be delayed. I do feel that once we're over this hurdle, we'll be in the position we haven't been frantically striving to attain all these years. The point that comes out of that is this. You've stuck to the work during the hardest times we could possibly have. We've been part of the backbone of the show. It doesn't seem right that just when we're on the verge of obtaining what we set out to attain, you miss the reward of all those years of work. I don't say we're entering the land flowing with milk and honey or anything like that. But in the future, if we don't feel satisfied with things, then the fault will be ours and no one else's. I hope to hear the results of their discussions on this subject within the next 2 weeks. Now, Ellen, will you do this for me and the reserve? Stay on the active list till you hear the new scheme made official, until you can see for yourself what lies ahead in the future, and then may make your decision. Possibly you've made other plans for the next few Sunday mornings. If so, that's okay with me, and if not, can I send back your section crystal? I don't mind whether you're active or not during these next Sundays, so long as I can still retain your name on our active roll until the changeover. Think that over and give me a word on it, will you? I must fly to work now, and I've spent longer on this than I anticipated, but sometimes I had to say just what I was feeling. Well, of course, the RWF Reserve turned out to be one of the things that saved Australia in World War II, and so many of our members were involved. I thought that very revealing letter from the famous Vaughan Marshall was worth providing. This is VK3AMD and VK3ATN for the Radio Old Timers Club. And the next item is about signalling and comes from the November issue of Certacito, the magazine of the Royal Australian Signals Association. The writer is Frank Cranston, and his story is headed Pigeons, War Heroes. Something's happening there. D Company 47 Battalion was in trouble. It was savagely attacked by retreating Japanese forces on Bougainville and looked like being overwhelmed. Still being attacked, it advised Battalion Headquarters on July the 3rd, 1945, and running low, situation grim, request artillery fire on 136430. And that was not its only trouble. In blinding rain, the troops in the company could see little enough of the enemy, which were threatening to overwhelm them, and the radio had been rendered useless by the rain. A runner might get through and he might not, but in any case there might not be time. But in at least one respect, D Company was luckier than some other units which encountered similar problems. It was luck in the shape of 3863 D/D44, one blue-checkered hen pigeon of the Australian signals. 3863 D/D44 got through to headquarters despite the tropical rainstorm and despite the fact she had to fly over Japanese positions to get to base. She survived fire from about 60 rifles. The artillery swamped the grid reference and a reinforcement party brought up the ammunition. In 1944, G. Brewer Task Force was in trouble too outside Trebito, where it was realized that at least 200 Japanese were strongly entrenched with sufficient food to last for weeks. At least 10 Japanese controls had come within speaking distance of the small Australian unit's position. The enemy was in too great a strength for successful attack. The use of radio would have given away the Australians' position. 879 D/D43Q, a blue-checkered cock pigeon, was released with the appeal for an airstrike against Rabito to break up the enemy concentration. The bird covered 25 miles to the Allied headquarters in 47 minutes. The bombers were sent in and the Australian force moved forward. The use of pigeons in the savage jungle fighting, which ranged throughout the islands north of Australia, was often the only practical means of communication. In climates where radio could quickly be rendered useless, they formed a vital link. Two of the Australian birds were recorded at Dicking Medal, sometimes called the Animals BC, for services rendered. But as the war drew to its close, it was realised that they might have served their masters well. There was no place back in Australia for the Army's pigeons because of the company's quarantine regulations. The order was issued, they had to be slaughtered. The D Company 47 Battalion episode is backed up by the following extract from the letter of L. Harriman, one of its members. And it reads, Battle of Bougainville. It was during a 3 days battle we were constantly attacked by the Japanese. We were attacked morning, noon and nightfall. Signal wires had been cut. Wounded mates lay inside our perimeter. There were 2 pigeons given to our company to be used in case of emergency. They'd been completely forgotten under trying conditions that we were encountering. These pigeons had no food, only water. Brackets. When birds were sent out with infantry patrols, all they were given was water and they had to be released on the 3rd day regardless. It was Captain McDonald who was in charge and he thought of the pigeons, so he released them, both of them with a message under heavy fire. Luckily the message reached base and immediately tanks were sent to our aid. After one more day's encounter, we were able to move on and the wounded cared for because of what our little splendid friends had done. It was during the battle that the captain and second in command were awarded the Military Cross, and there were 2 military medals won also. We were informed later that the bird which carried the message through heavy fire had been awarded the Dickon Medal, the Animal, Bird and Victoria Cross, and later all pigeons were outstanding in the islands, were stuffed and mounted in the War Museum in Canberra. Why I write this is because some people do not realise what splendid work these birds have done. This is a true story. I was there, and I was one of the chaps saved by a pigeon. Yours, ex-Private L. Haveron, Don Company, 4th Battalion. I thought that was a nice story toward the end of our transmission. This is VK3OTN. And after VK3 has retrieved this next item from a friend via the internet. One night a father overheard his son saying his prayers, God bless Mummy and Daddy and goodbye Grandma. Well, the father thought it was goodbye Grandpa, I'm sorry. The father thought it was strange and he soon forgot about it, but the next day Grandfather died. About a month or 2 later, the father heard his son saying his prayers again, God bless Mummy, God bless Daddy, and goodbye Grandma. The next day, the grandmother died. Well, the father was getting more than a little worried about this situation, especially 2 weeks later, when he once heard the boy saying his prayers, and he said, God bless Mummy, and goodbye Daddy. That alone nearly gave the father a heart attack. He didn't say anything, but he got up early to go to work, so he missed the traffic. He stayed all through lunch and dinner, and finally after midnight he went home. He was still alive. When he got home, he apologized to his wife and said, I'm sorry, honey, I had a very bad day at work today. You think you had a bad day. You think you had a bad day, the wife yelled. The postman dropped in on my doorstep this morning. On that happy note, I'll leave you with all possible good wishes for health and happiness at Christmas and the hope for peace in the new year. This is Alan Doble, VK3AMD, and associated relay stations as VK3OM, the official call sign of the Radio Amateurs Alzheimer's Club of Australia. We now conclude our transmission for this month and hope you found it interesting. We'll be on the air again on Monday the 5th of February. I repeat, Monday the 5th of February, because you'll remember we do not have a transmission in January. Times and frequencies can be checked in the current issue number 27 of our club magazine, OTN, which was published last September. Please stand by and join in the call-back sessions on the frequency you've been listening to. Thank you for listening, and 73. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
You have been listening to VK3OTN. VK3OTN is the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club, Australia. This concludes this month's news and information bulletin. The next RAOTC news and information broadcast will take place on the first Monday of next month, on the same frequencies and at the same times as today, with the exception of January. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you will join in the callbacks, where callbacks are taken. 73 everyone.